Hey, nerds. So, I'm going to continue my series on the book by the 18th and 19th century Christian existentialist philosopher Soren Kierkegaard on his book called Concluding Unscientific Postscript to Philosophical Fragments. And before I get started here, please, if you order anything, literally anything at all through my Amazon link, it doesn't have to be what I put in the description. Literally anything on Amazon through my description, and I get a little kickback and no extra cost to you. You can give me a tip for each individual video on Patreon, or you can give me any amount of money per month. And check out my Rumble page too, and subscribe, like, and share here on YouTube. All right, so yeah, I actually almost unintentionally re-released the first one in this series before releasing this one. So my most recent video, go check it out. It's something like Christian Destroys Truth or something like that. So we're gonna get into the second paragraph today, and basically what Kierkegaard gets into in this book that we got into more specifically in detail before. We got more into the detail of the first paragraph rather, so I won't go into as much detail with that one because I'm going right into the second one with this one since it's relevant. But he's basically like he was almost seen as like an atheist for his time, even though like he was Christian and he was a theologian. But he's talking about different kinds of truth, and he talked about whether we can take the Bible literally. And he gets into, in this second paragraph that I'm going to get into more specifically, he gets into basically his opinion that when people are wondering what's true, they don't actually mean what is objectively true. They kind of mean, whether they would admit it or not, subjectively true, because knowing the objective truth is worse than being happy. Apparently, you can't have both. So, happiness is better than truth, with that, which I think is an interesting perspective. Like, Cypher in the Matrix was kind of right. Ignorance is bliss. If the Matrix were real, I would prefer living in a simulation. But obviously, truth is preferable most of the time, but it depends on what type of truth you're talking about and in what relevant context, because there can be different types of truths that are useful in different contexts, right? All right, so we'll get into, I'm going to just review the first paragraph here first. All right, so part one, the objective issue of the truth of Christianity. Objectively viewed, Christianity is a res in facto posita given fact. So we could say an a priori, Kantian style synthetic a priori or faith claim, I would say, one that is assumed to be true without even having to necessarily be proved through evidence or logical argument, which is why I think that a priori claims are inherently fundamentally flawed. But there, you can debate about a priori and in a posteriori truths, like truths that have to be justified by evidence and slash or argument. But just for the sake of argument, we'll describe what he's getting into here. So Christianity is a given fact, the truth of which is asked about in a purely objective way, because the modest subject is much too objective not to leave himself out, or without further ado, to include himself as someone who has a faith as a matter of course. So basically, when we're talking about whether Christianity is true or not, we cannot possibly view looking at this question in a way other than objective, because we can't get ourselves out of our mindsets that we believe we have, in which we look at the world rationally, and we understand objective truth. We seek out and we find objective truth. So we can't find the pure truth, ironically, because we're not admitting that we're looking for it objectively, even though we're actually looking for it subjectively, as she's about to get at. Okay. Someone who has a faith as a matter of course. So a given fact, right? So they think they need to objectively prove it, but they don't actually do, because they take it as a given fact. Some Christians he's talking about. Thus, objectively understood, truth can signify. So he's getting into different types of truths here. historical truth and philosophical truth. And I've talked about this with countless philosophers before, right? Like Hegel, Foucault, Derrida, countless other philosophers throughout human history talk about different types of truth, which makes sense because they're, like I was saying, there are different types of truths that are more relevant for different contexts. So historical truth and philosophical truth, he's going to explain those, but some of it is somewhat self-explanatory, right? Like truth based on our knowledge of what happened in history versus truth based on like philosophical argument, that sort of thing. And those are different types of truth than objective truth, right? You would basically say that that is subjectively true. Or if you're saying that one is objectively true and one is subjectively true, you could say that historical truth is more objective than philosophical truth. All right, so viewed as historical truth, so he's explaining historical truth. Viewed as historical truth, the truth must be established by a critical consideration of the various reports, etc. In short, in the same way as historical truth is ordinarily established. So you look at history and decide what's accurate, and you decide what is true based on this historical appraisal of facts. If they are facts. In the case of philosophical truth, the inquiry turns on the relation of a doctrine historically given and verified to the eternal truth. So if we're talking about the truth of Christianity or the objective or subjective truth of it, it relates to, in terms of philosophical truth, Christianity relates to a doctrine and the eternal truth, or ironically, historical, well, not ironically, but interestingly, historical doctrine and eternal truth. So from a Christian perspective, philosophy would say that we find eternal truth by means of a historically established doctrine. And historical truth would say that we know the truth of Christianity based on our assessment of history. Christians would say that, is what he's saying. All right, so we'll get on to the paragraph that's basically just explaining the context from the first paragraph and that I got into in the video before, in terms of its relation to this paragraph, then we get into more in here, right here, I should say. All right, so the inquiring, speculating, knowing subject accordingly asks about the truth, but not about the subjective truth, the truth of appropriation. So as he was saying in the first paragraph, right, we think that we're asking what is true in terms of the truth of Christianity, but we ironically can't actually see the eternal objective truth because we're trapped in our mindsets that we can analyze and arrive at objective truth, even though our analysis of truth in the world, and specifically he's talking about the truth of Christian claims, are inherently subjective. So the inquiring, speculating, knowing subject accordingly asks about the truth, but not about the subjective truth, the truth of appropriation. And he's going to get to the key point here. Accordingly, the inquiring subject is indeed interested, but is not infinitely, personally, and passionately interested in his relation to this truth concerning his own eternal happiness. So if you're a Christian looking to prove Christian claims as objectively true, you can't do it because you can't escape your mindset that you think your analyses of what is true in terms of Christianity are objective, but they're actually subjective because you're trapped in your mindset of thinking that you are subjective when you're actually subjective. I might have just said that twice in a row. So this means that whether a Christian is actually, even no matter how interested Kierkegaard is saying a Christian is in finding out what is objectively true, he can only find out what is subjectively true, because finding out what is objectively true will not help you in your eternal happiness, which I think is an interesting view coming from a Christian in particular, that like you shouldn't care what is true. What's better is being happy. This also reminds me of more of the mindset that my favorite atheist pragmatist Richard Rorty gets into in his book with the Catholic philosopher Gianni Vittimo called The Future of Religion, in which he's basically saying that from a religious perspective, what is true about God doesn't really matter. It's basically like this idea of your own personal God. and what's true for you is what matters. It doesn't really matter because these claims don't have any relevance in reality anyway, so it doesn't matter. That's why when asked about whether God exists, Richard Rorty would say, who cares? That's a more interesting atheist view that is more like what I have rather than the stupid militant atheist view like that of Sam Harris, that religion is all evil and there's nothing good about it. That's stupid. And we know through moral foundations theory that and cultural evolution that religion helped for bonding societies together. That doesn't mean you have to be religious. It just means a sense of community is a good thing to have. That's all. But anyway, so accordingly, the inquiring subject is indeed interested, but is not infinitely, personally, and passionately interested in his relation to this truth concerning his own internal happiness. Far be it from the objective subject to be so modest, so vain. You see? So the objective Christian, this supposedly objective Christian, is so immodest and vain that he or she can't. That well, that's they. Let's say they. So I don't have to say he or she. Because so Christians are so vain and lack humility. That's the word I'm looking for, and lack humility so much that they think they can arrive at objective truth. But actually, whether they admit it or not, they don't actually want to. Not only do they not actually want to arrive at the objective truth, they actually are incapable of doing so because you're trapped in your worldview that leads you to believe that you have an objective view of reality, whereas in reality, we all only have subjective. In reality, we all only have subjective views of reality, and also the truth doesn't matter because it won't make you happy and lead to this religious happiness or lead you to heaven or paradise or whatever, or even just like, happiness in the real world. So basically saying happiness is better than truth. And, you know, I like operating based on what is true, but also, as I've said a million times, truth is overrated a lot of the time, and there are different types of truth that are relevant for different situations. And in some cases, I totally agree with Kierkegaard. Basically, the point that he's getting at here is what is what Cypher says in the Matrix from a different perspective. Ignorance is bliss. All right, so everyone, subscribe, and that's the most important thing to the channel. Like, share, comment, order anything at all on Amazon through my link, literally anything at all, and I get a little kickback at no extra cost to you. You can tip me for each individual video on Patreon if you don't want to send me a particular amount of money per month, or you can give me any dollar a month, any amount of money per month, like even $1 a month. And check out my Rumble page too. Subscribe to that as well, please. And yeah, thanks everyone. And adios until next time. Bye, nerds.